Hello, GM.
You want to tell the people who you are, where you come from, what's your name, what do you do?
Yeah, sure. Hey, so my name's Kevin. I'm from San Francisco, California. A little bit about myself. I have 12 years in marketing background. That whole time has been in consumer tech. So a little bit of gaming, working with Ubisoft. 4 years at Hulu, working in entertainment and streaming. 4 years in social media, doing product marketing for Instagram. Most recently, working in fintech for 1 year at Chime. And currently, I'm doing product marketing for Nifty Gateway. So I give that background just because I've been doing marketing for a lot longer than I've been doing NFTs.
Wow, okay, and we're talking today about strategies for global brands entering the NFT space. But first I want to start with what prompted you to make the transition from all of these cool Web 2 jobs into Web 3? You're at Nifty.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the whole philosophy and ethos around Web3 in terms of consumers actually owning a piece of their assets that they have digitally, right? And I think this is kind of like the bull thesis that I think everyone is here for is, especially with the pandemic, like you mentioned, everyone is spending more and more time online, and the lines between physical and digital are becoming more and more blurred, right? So I like, sneakers, fashion, things like that. If you really think about it, it's like if you buy a, Jordan 1, it's like maybe 10, 20 people of your friends will see it, but if you have a really highly sought after profile picture, thousands, potentially millions of people can see it, right? So just knowing that, and then just knowing that, Web 2 has really been kind of a one-sided proposition in terms of value, I wanted to take part in that next evolution where people can actually own their digital assets.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you. Strong. A lot of really powerful things are coming with this next iteration, and I see a lot of it as enhancing what we've been doing in Web 2 or enhancing this digital experience. Where do you see the first step? So whenever you're getting into this new space and there's so many possibilities, where do you start?
Yeah, so I think one thing for a lot of brands is when it comes to NFTs and the blockchain, I think it makes sense to be patient because I think this is a paradigm shift at the level of the protocol, almost like email, right? Yeah. Imagine trying to rush to being the first to email. There's not really a benefit to that. I think with more short-term platforms and trends like TikTok, Instagram at the time, with those, there is a benefit to being early because those are a little bit more trend-oriented. But with NFTs, the blockchain, Web3, I think that's a paradigm level shift at the protocol, similar to email. So there's actually no point in rushing, and I think it actually makes sense to be very patient, very thoughtful, very intentional before you approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so once people make that first step, they're like, okay, I want to be thoughtful about this. I want to start learning. What do you think is the most important thing for brands entering the NFT space in general, and then we can go into a global scale?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the two biggest, I think the biggest thing is recognizing that NFT is a technology, and the technology can enable you to do different things, right? So it's not just JPEGs, it's not just pictures, it's an actual technology, a platform, a protocol that you can leverage in different ways. So just as an example, you'll want to think of what does this technology really enable or empower my business, my brand to do? And there's a couple examples of things that NFTs and blockchain do really well, right? So one is provenance. So being able to reward your customers in perpetuity. And then the second is interoperability, right? So being able to own that data and that relationship directly with your consumers, right? So not having a middleman like a Facebook or Amazon to have to deal with. You can actually own the relationship, the data directly with your consumers, right? So those are just two examples. And I think if you think about that, it's there's some obvious answers for depending on your brand or your business, right? So one could be loyalty and rewards, right? Instead of having to rely on email or text messaging, you can actually have something on the blockchain that shows, hey, so-and-so's been a customer or a fan of my brand for over 10 years now, and I want to reward them greatly, right? So that's the kind of thing that NFTs, Web3 enable brands to do.
And how do you feel like that changes whenever we do look at this from a more global perspective? I mean, the NFT space to me right now seems very in the US. What does it look like on a global scale? Does it change at all? Do the strategies change?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love that because it always reminds me, right? Like obviously we're in New York. I'm American. I was born in California. I'm a Californian. It's like it's very easy to become American centric, but when you think about the blockchain, Web3, and even just cryptocurrency in general, it does enable you to become a lot more borderless, right? I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and they were saying like, I really hate it when we talk about different NFTs or art or collectibles in a U.S. dollar denomination because in reality, we're here from all over the world, and Ethereum, Tezos, things like that, those actually allow us to have a global conversation that's beyond language. And I think that's actually a super important thing for global brands to recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. Is is that is that what you're most excited about? Like, what are you most excited about when it comes to global brands and brands in general getting into the NFT space?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is my biggest hope, my biggest optimism is that it's gonna unlock a lot of potential new like use cases that aren't being like currently thought of. And
Any in particular?
I think you're starting to see some early experimentation. I think I saw something where Chevy was gonna auction off a Corvette NFT, and you get the Corvette car with the token. I'm hoping that we're gonna see more things like that. I'm also curious to just see like keys, digital footprints. I know there's like some coalitions with like Web2 companies like Microsoft, Apple, trying to create like a unified passwordless internet. Hopefully like NFTs and tokens will be able to unlock those types of use cases, make them public goods and public utilities. And hopefully like brands and corporations will see enough of an incentive to like actually help build that and contribute to like the actual public space of like the digital sphere versus just building for private gain.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think whenever the community hears more about brands getting into the space, sometimes there's a lot of friction, a lot of hesitancy. They're like, well, do we want brands in the space messing up our awesome community and changing things and maybe making it less decentralized? I've noticed some good things that have come from brands coming to the space, like putting some of these projects on the map for people who are new to the space and helping onboard people. What do you think are some benefits from brands entering?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a benefit is kind of having another advocate or a champion with a lot of resources and a lot of power and equity to kind of help onboard the next level of users. But at the same time, brands helping to onboard more people to Web3 is very valuable and very beneficial, like I said, because they have their resources. But at the same time, it's also a very risky endeavor, right? Because if they do something that's too fast, too cash grabby, too one-sided, and that's a lot of people's like first interaction with Web3, NFTs, the blockchain, it could potentially be damaging to the whole space and the landscape as a whole. So that's why I hope that brands are actually a lot more patient and intentional. Because I think as of right now, the risks are actually a lot higher than the rewards for most global brands.
Yeah, that's a great point. I absolutely agree with that. But I think one thing I was just thinking of while you were speaking was also the accountability that brands have. I remember seeing that with Gary Vee talking about 555, mint be friends, this new. I was like, what is an NFT? What is going on? And I remember thinking, well, if this man has Fortune 500 clients that he can lose his credibility over, like why would he risk his reputation for something unless he really believed in it? Do you think that brands themselves are skeptical because of the intense accountability that they have, or do you think that actually makes them excited to jump in the space because then maybe they feel like they can commit more?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, if they aren't afraid of accountability, they should be, right? Right? Like that's literally like the provenance, the history is immutable. You should definitely treat that with respect and caution, because if you screw over your customers, that's going to be printed on the blockchain for the end of time. And I actually think like with Gary Vee is like, he's really smart because I think in a lot of his conversations, he kind of hedges that element, that high risk element, by candidly being very open about saying 99% of these projects are going to go to zero. And I think that's not wrong if you think about the volume of projects that are being put out, right? 1% is still actually a large in terms of pure quantity. just given the volume. But yeah, so I think it should be approached with caution, and I think I mean Gary in particular is like obviously hedged it very well.
Yeah, I agree. But when it comes to brands, do you see NFT projects as brands themselves, or do you just think of the brands that we think of that are large, like PepsiCo and Budweiser, like these Fortune 500 companies? Where do you draw the line? Like, what do you see? What do you mean by brand when you say it?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, whether it's a person, an entity, whatever, the brand is just the reputation that you have with people, right? And I think if you ask people like how you perceive me, that pretty much defines your brand. But in regards to NFT projects specifically, I mean, of course they're brands. Like I think right now that's actually like kind of their biggest value proposition is that it is a brand that represents something. It is a brand that you identify with in your identity. And when you're purchasing it, you're actually communicating something about yourself, who you are, what your values are, and what you care about. So yeah, I mean, that's how I define brand. And I would definitely consider things like, I mean, obviously I think everyone's been plugged into like what the announcements with Doodles, right? Like they're taking brand very seriously, working with Pharrell, et cetera.
Yeah. Whenever I think of Doodles, I think of that incredible activation they did at South by Southwest whenever they really went viral. Is there anything now I'm thinking of like fun brand activations when Bud Light put the nouns on the Super Bowl commercial.
So good.
And we had
good. I love nouns.
Legend, yeah. What were some activations, I don't know what better to call them, some key moments that brands have had that have maybe made you either question it or excited about the possibilities of it?
Yeah, I mean, like I hope no one from Jimmy John's is here, but my wife loves sandwiches, so I was like, okay, I want to get her ENS meta sandwich.eth. I just want to go get that for her just for fun. And as I was looking for a meta sandwich,
respect.
yeah, and as I was looking for a meta sandwich, I saw Jimmy John's created like a sandwich for the metaverse, and that is such a bad idea. It's like literally like it just I don't know. It just reminded me of like Pogs or Taco Bell Star Wars Episode 1. It's just very trend oriented, right? I think it just says a lot. I really hope no one from Jimmy John's is here, but like
I hope they are.
But it really just says like they really do see it as a novelty, a toy. Oh, cool, VR glasses, Oculus. They treat it kind of like Roblox, or I don't think they clearly didn't understand like what the value is. I would have loved to see more of like a Jimmy John's utility token or like a membership pass, and and it's so easy to build an engagement to it, right? It's like if once you claim the pass, you get a free sandwich. Oh, you come 10 times. Like there's so many things that are so obvious that you could do. But yeah, that was a pretty bad example, I think. Like that's pretty cringe.
I love that you just got real about that. A question that I'll get asked a lot from brands wanting to enter the space is, do they focus on bringing their existing audience into the space, or do they focus on the NFT natives that are already in the space? Because they're two very different audiences. What do you typically recommend? What would you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, from a sheer business perspective, candidly, like the NFT native ecosystem is still so small, to kind of prioritize that audience first could potentially be like a wrong ROI. It depends, right? It really depends. Like if your brand is focused on being perceived as innovative, then it makes sense to go into the NFT native ecosystem, be really in touch with the degens and do it right. Like if you want to be perceived as innovative, on the edge, cool. So it makes sense for Nike, Adidas, right? Brands like that makes perfect sense. But if you're a mainstream brand that has a mainstream audience, like Tide, Clorox, if you're a CPG company, I personally think like absolutely do not prioritize. It's because it's going to be really hard to win over the NFT native enthusiasts. And also from a business perspective, just the ROI is going to be so much smaller, right? Like what are you to gain like by getting 1 million, 2 million people on the upside of the NFT community to be like using Tide Pods more? It just, to me, that just doesn't make sense. It would be about, as NFTs continue to grow in popularity, in adoption, how can you as Tide reward your best customers, your most loyal customers, your most, you're just your biggest demographic and cater to them. I mean, as a brand, that's always should be the number one thought is how can you be customer-centric, consumer-centric, and what do your consumers want?
Yeah, and I think for brands, because especially for brands who don't have a team of NFT natives and OGs, I think it's a lot harder for them to appeal to that community, like you were saying. But I do think whenever they do it right, it becomes way more fun. Like I feel like
Absolutely.
They're looking at things flipped. Like typically a media strategy would say, okay, we're gonna appeal to the masses because we know we'll get a small percentage. But in the NFT community, it's okay, well, let's appeal to this small group because we'll get a large percentage. But what do you think is different about the strategy? So let's say I'm tied and I want to get into the NFT space, and I ask you that question. You're like, let's start with your existing community. Let's see how we can bring them in. What do you think is key to bringing that community into their project or the Web3 space?
Yeah. You have to be really thoughtful with that. You have to make it easy to onboard. You'll probably just want to think about ways of reducing friction. And that's kind of where the beauty is, because that'll help the whole community, right? Because if you don't try to solve those major consumer hurdles, you're going to burn a lot of new people that are supposed to be onboarded. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought, but
Yeah, onboarding them.
Yeah.
So like educational toolkit and maybe walking them through the process of getting a MetaMask, and that is that what you mean by onboarding?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you want to make it hidden, right? In a way, like, we all use Netflix and Airbnb, but we don't go like, oh, we love AWS. Like we're AWS fanatics. We love, we love the cloud. It's, eventually it's going to be like you're really you're getting discounts, you're getting rewards, and you're collecting points, and you'll be using the blockchain, you'll be interacting with the blockchain, but you won't know it. And I think that's the biggest thing is you have to understand where your consumers are and like where they are in the journey of the technology. Because if they're not ready yet and you jump in it too early, you're going to burn a lot of people, and that's going to be a downside, a negative to the whole space. But on the flip side, like I said, like if you do want to be perceived as an innovative brand, then definitely tap in and key into the culture. Be really, that's the thing is you got to be keyed into the community. You have to know what they're into. You have to understand memes. You have to be willing to have fun, not take it too seriously. It's like approaching like sneakerheads or skaters in the early 2000s or whatever, right? You can't do like a pogo stick action movie. Like you have to actually like understand like what people fucking care about.
Yeah. Facts. Is there anything, now that we're getting close to time, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
No, I actually really enjoyed our
Crushed
conversation.
it.
No, and I'm actually like, it's kind of funny because we literally just met, and so like I appreciate your questions, and that was actually really fun and like really good, and like, so yeah, nothing else.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, any last takeaway? What do you think is key to brands, global brands, entering the NFT space?
I mean, it's just universal. Treat it like it's a technology, not a trend, and think about your consumer first, and think about your brand. I mean, those.
Amazing. Kevin, thank you so much.
Cool.
You did a
Thanks,
great
Leslie.
job.